My name is Marcia Barbosa. I am a Brazilian physicist, theoretical physicist, and I am the director of the Brazilian Academy of Science. The Brazilian Academy of Science have 100 years old. It sounds little for European standards, but for Brazilian standards, it's very old. It's combined scientists, high standard scientists, and we all the time are looking the ways in which we can help the Brazil, the Latin America, and the world to have better answers, scientific answers to the problems that there is in the world. The Academy helps a number of events or workshops and write documents, including documents that say how Brazil have to evolve in order to become a developed country. Brazil at the moment is suffering from a huge decrease in funding for science. It didn't start in this government. It actually started in the previous government, in which they frozen the amount of money that can go to science. But they didn't frozen at the high level of funding. They frozen in a very small level of funding. In 2016, they frozen the money when it was 1/4 of the money of 2013. So it's freezing in a low level. But then this current government not only keep up with the freezing, but also start to decrease even further. And in fact, it's holding a policy that is not only to decrease the amount of funding, but it's also to diminish the way in which the population sees science and see universities. So the Minister of Education, for instance, all the time is calling the people at universities to be parasites, to be not working hard, to be people that don't deserve it, any recognition of the population. Fortunately, there are people in the current government that understand the value of science. And the Minister of Science and Technology that have this little funny, understand that science is important and we are in deep dialogue as Academy of Science. And also the Minister of Health is a person that understands the value of health. But again, the funding for him is a very little funding. The real problem is what they call the middle-aged part of the government. Is a part of the government that don't recognize the value of science, that don't understand the meaning of women rights, that don't understand the meaning of having a country that relies on evidence. This part is the one that scares me, not only because it's cutting money from science and education, but it's directing the money to organizations that do organization and do science in a very low level. And also because it is spreading rumors that are not based on scientific knowledge. Just to give an example, at this very moment, the president is saying that the virus, this very horrible COVID-19 virus, is not real a threat. That's just a small virus, that you can battle against this virus just by being an athlete when you're a teenager, or saying that we are going to pray on Sunday and not eat during the whole day of Sunday, so we are going to win against the virus. In this moment, the scientists are very important because we are not only working hard in the public system of health in order to check if the people have the virus, check the evidence and make public the reality of the system, the numbers of people sick, the numbers of people dying. And also we are doing strong research towards find better medications for this problem and a way to have a vaccine for that. But I think the more important thing the academy and the academicians and the scientists are doing, it's go in front and talk to the journalists, talk to the media, what is their reality. the number of fake informations, the fake news that are being spread about this problem and about other problems as well. Fake news have been dominating the press toward the environment and other issues. Now scientists, they are understanding the necessity to talk.
In this channel, we are going to share also videos that the Brazilian Academy of Science have produced about Brazilian scientists of the past, and with the title Science Creates Development. More than ever, you wrote on your website, more than ever before, the practice of scientific outreach has a crucial role on the destiny of science in the country. Could you tell us more about this?
In a developing country as Brazil, the population have very little recognition that Brazilians in the past, in the present, and they will keep on in the future. They made a scientists that are breakthroughs and that end up creating development for the country. In many countries, this is obvious because they have well-known scientists, Nobel Prize winners, people that are famous in the population. But that's not the case of Brazil. Each time I go to some place in a taxi driver and I tell I'm a scientist, they ask, is there a scientist in Brazil? The scientists, they do anything relevant? They usually are very surprised that there are scientists in Brazil. And some people, even people in the economic sector, business people, they say, the scientists in Brazil, they only look to irrelevant questions. So the Brazilian Academy of Science decided to highlight some of the scientists that made something that is very clear that generate development. And you create a series. It's something for everybody. The language is very clear, and it's very short. It's like 2 minutes. And we tried to have some diversity. So the first one is a woman that developed the way we plant soybeans nowadays in Brazil. And we describe her findings, scientific findings, but also her fight to make the politicians to understand that her way, that's different from the USA way, was the right way to Brazil. So you can see science and politics in the same package. Then we told also a story of a scientist that was a military, something very unusual to happen in Brazil. But he was an unusual guy because this guy, at the same time that the United States was creating the National Science Foundation, create in Brazil a foundation to fund science in Brazil. He was a visionary, not only a visionary for political issues, but also a visionary because this is a very old story. He was during the Second World War in Brazil. And at that time, he realized that Brazil, that is entering the war against Germany, rely on German chemicals to do anything of the development. So he, by himself, developed new chemicals that replace the chemicals that we usually bought from Germany. So he went to the lab, developed all chemicals to cover boats, everything he developed by himself. So it's a scientist that also have the vision. We told them someone that developed a new method for diabetes. And we have finally a story about a social scientists, because sometimes in some countries, and in Brazil in particular, people don't think the social scientists are scientists. And this is so strong, so embedded in our culture that just recently, the Minister of Science and Technology decided that most of the fundings in science in Brazil, we go for very specific engineering and technological areas and not any penny for the social scientists. And that is crazy because anytime you want to solve a problem, you need a social science to understand how we implement this. And we have this brilliant guy called Milton Santos. Milton Santos was a Black scientist, what's very rare in Brazil, by the way, that understood that in developing countries, the dynamics of the big cities is like a combination of the dynamics of a first world country, a very developed country, with all the technologies, with the very underdeveloped. And that these two things entangled together. What means that something that we are facing today, that even though the coronavirus came from people that travel abroad, very rich, wealthy people, the first person who died was the maid of a wealthy person. So the social dynamics was viewed by this man more than 50 years ago. That's now we are realizing in the dynamics of the spreading of a disease. So understanding the social interactions was this big discovery of Milton Santos. And then you can go on and on with the different people that contributed to a science discovery that became developed and understanding of the developing we have to draw for countries, and in particular, my country, Brazil.
Marcia, my last question, how do you see the future? What are the hopes that you have for the future?
First, when you come back from this quarantine, the world will be different. That's for sure. How we behave, how you handle this different world, you depend on studies and evidence. So we need scientists right now, and that's what they are doing in all the different fields, to be prepared, to understand, and to bring ideas how we are going to survive in a very different world. And I'm not saying just because when you come back, probably you are going to have economic impacts. But now we know that we can have different pandemics, different effects, that when you trash the environment come back to you. So we have to be better prepared for this new world. But I'm optimistic. I think tomorrow is going to be better, because one good thing arose from this thunderstorm is the fact that science is the answer. And when I say science, I'm saying evidence. I'm saying all kinds of science based on evidence. And I'm optimistic that most of the governments are going to listen to the science, are going to listen to the evidence. And a second aspect that came out from this thunderstorm is that I'm seeing the better of the people. People are realizing how weak we are. So how important is one to support each other. People are sharing, and from that, I believe we are going to solve in our way back a worse threat, that's the environmental threat. A worse threat, that's the lack of fresh water. So this pandemic will have a consequence. Tomorrow will be better.